Well, David, we've got a lot to discuss today. How are you?
I'm very well, Jason. Good to be with you.
Nice to see you as always. It's springtime. I hope the weather is nice there in British Columbia.
Well, let's take it one step backwards. Yesterday was beautiful.
Huh. Well, you can't have everything, right?
Right.
But David, today we're going to be talking about SERCO agents and scrubbing of evidence and the very bizarre terrorist knife attack on London Bridge. It seems an inefficient way for terrorists to achieve their goal of mass terror, doesn't it?
Except that the people like this, they're low-grade patsies, and of course they're being manipulated. And let me say congratulations again on your incredible collages. It's humorous and so on. I do find that Mr. Swigart must be extremely uncomfortable at the juxtaposition of the sign held by Christine Marcy, Field McConnell's sister. And, but anyway, I think perhaps discomfort is something he deserves on a large scale. But just focusing on that middle image. So what we've got there is he's scrubbing the logo of the United States Secret Service. So at first blush, that might appear a little enigmatic, but if people go back into what you and I have been discussing over the past weeks, if you will, they'll know that we've identified this split tunnel patented system where you can take a crime scene or a wrongful death event and split the data from that event that would normally be required to be kept together if the people who are investigating it had any chance of solving it into three tunnels, one of which carries the images, for example, with the time and location stamp as to when it is acquired. And obviously, if you don't know when the data was acquired, exactly where it was acquired, you might start developing a theory of the crime that doesn't honor the empirical data that's been taken from the crime scene. So, cut a long story short, that seems to be the situation with the attack in 2017 on the London Bridge, where knife-wielding terrorists actually drove a vehicle into, I think, killed about 5 or 6 people on the bridge, and then proceeded to a pub nearby and stabbed some people to death in a suburb. And of course, the BBC has, I don't know, not monopoly rights to live transmission from these scenes, but obviously people should understand the BBC is not a competitive media outlet. It's been the news, entertainment and propaganda arm of the British government since the 1920s, which was the year that RCA GB 1929 was formed, which is now SERCO. So the ability to collect a license fee from radio and television means that they can fund journalists, or what passes as journalists, or investigators, or what passes as investigators, and have them at crime scenes before the crime occurs, which of course is what they had in New York on 911 when Jane Stanley reported to the BBC that building number 7 had come down 20 minutes before it did. And I think that's a clear example of this split tunnel fraud, if you will, on data from the crime scene. So you've got this man, Swigart, a self-described ethical hacker, scrubbing the logo of the Secret Service. And I don't know if you were familiar with what the Secret Service does, but I looked up, I think it's actually, if I may, Jason, I'm just going to read from Wikipedia.
Sure.
I mean, it's rather a long paragraph, but do you think that makes sense if I could do that?
Yeah. Well, I think it's very interesting, David, because, perhaps this is why Mr. Swigart expressed such discomfort with the presence of our new friend, John Carmen, who will be joining us again on Friday. I want to encourage everyone to join us on Fridays, where we do our subscriber exclusive show on patreon.com/reverse CSI storyboards and patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. I also want to mention subscribestar.com/crowdsource the truth, because I think it's important, David, that we continue to expose and even frustrate the methods that these social engineers use. I don't know if you're familiar with a guy named Manuel Chavez, but you just mentioned a term, time and location. And of course, everyone has heard of both of those things, but when used in a sort of a compound phrase like that, this seems like sort of an investigative thing. You have time and location on a target, a subject, a piece of evidence, you know quite a bit about it. And you've jogged my memory that while I was being pursued, both in the real world and online, in part by Manuel Chavez and some of his associates, including David Swigert, he mentioned that time and location. They wanted time and location on me or Quinn Michaels, I forget who it was. And that's quite a chilling prospect. If someone is stalking you or attempting to locate you to intimidate or attack in some way, obviously they'd need the time and location of where you are.
And obviously, if there's data and evidence being accumulated at a crime scene, if you can strip off the data with the time and location stamps on it and send that to a privileged minority, which I think we both agreed that appropriate terminology was a whitelist,
right?
Basically the friends and insiders of what we are coming to call the evil teachers. Now, it's unfortunate for the teachers, they put those three letters to describe, the electronic visualization laboratory in the University of Illinois, Chicago. But if you look at that facility, you'll see it's connected to a global network, probably assembled with a significant input from Bernardine Dawn, the Weather Underground terrorist leader, who is on faculty at Northwestern University.
David, I'm sorry to interrupt. I meant to tell you, today, for the first time, I tweeted our video at William Ayers. So perhaps he's watching.
Well, he should do, because he'd better get himself ready. Because anyway, so let me just read this first, this
Yes.
paragraph from Wikipedia about the United States Secret Service. And just to remind people, the Secret Service had an office on the 10th floor of building number 7 on 911, right? And so the Secret Service does this. The United States Secret Service, also USS or Secret Service, is a federal law enforcement agency under the Department of Homeland Security. Parenthetically, it was under the Department of the Treasury to 2003. Is charged with conducting criminal investigations and protecting the nation's leaders. Until 2003, the Secret Service was part of the Department of the Treasury, as the agency was originally founded to combat the then widespread counterfeiting of US currency. Now, I presume that Mr. Swigert is listening, so pin your ears back, Mr. Swigert, because this might entertain you. The function of the Secret Service is to safeguards the payment and financial system of the United States from a wide range of financial and electronic-based crimes. Financial investigations include counterfeit US currency, bank and financial institution fraud, mail fraud, wire fraud, illicit financing operations, and major conspiracies. Underline major conspiracies, Mr. Swigert. Electronic investigations include cybercrime, network intrusions, identity theft, access device fraud, credit card fraud, and intellectual property crimes, where I would say that anyone who is renting out a patent that they don't own in order to commit a crime is an intellectual property crime. And I would point out that a couple of IP lawyers of note in our investigation include Hillary Clinton and Michelle Obama. The Secret Service is a key member of the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force, which investigates and combats terrorism on a national and international scale, as well as of the high intensity data drug trafficking areas, HIDTA task force, which seeks to reduce and eliminate drug trafficking in critical regions of the United States. And of course, they should pay a great deal of attention to the border with British Columbia, which is a global hub for the movement of drugs. And this, I think, is very interesting, Mr. Swigert. The Secret Service also investigates missing and exploited children and is a core partner of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC. Could you go back to your collage? Maybe you didn't leave it. Let's go back. Right. So some people might think we're being cruel and perhaps not realize we're being satirical, because I'm sure anatomically that if that were true, Swaggart would not be wearing that expression on his face. But anyway, the fact is we have Christine Marcy, the sister of Field McConnell, a colleague of mine from, I think, 2006, December to last year, when we parted company, amicably, I trust. But when I first spoke with Field McConnell, I had been looking back then for a pilot who was an American who knew about civilian aircraft and jet fighter aircraft to help me do my reverse engineering analysis of the attack, for example, on the Pentagon, where as a mechanical engineer, I looked at the trajectory of that plane, and not knowing a great deal about piloting, I felt that the maneuver executed by that plane was pretty extraordinary. And he told me lots of things, including the fact that he had a senior bureaucrat as a sister in Washington. So he gave me her name, Christine Marcy. This was around December the 6th. I more or less immediately started looking for any reference to Christine Marcy, and my jaw dropped. It almost virtually is continuing to drop, because this, I believe, is the most powerful and most dangerous woman in the States. And comparing her with Hillary Clinton, who's also powerful and dangerous, my people might be a little bit surprised. The reason why she's so powerful is she created the database for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in 1984. In that same year, with Eric Holder, she started or launched the United States Department of Justice Asset Forfeiture Fund, which would have given her access to vast amounts of money confiscated from people who are driving around in Lamborghinis but can't justify that. They'll confiscate the Lamborghini and then have you sue them to try and get it back and prove that you acquired the Lamborghini legitimately. And she's also, in that period, 1984, she launched what became known as CONAIR, or the United States Department of Justice Prisoner and Alien Transportation System. So if you think by the mid-1980s, this woman had access to a database of missing and exploited children, the ability to transport the most dangerous men and women in and out of the country without any problem, and the ability to raise funds by confiscating money or assets from criminal patsies. So let's say, for example, in BC, which is a center for drug trafficking into the United States, they wanted to get 10 tons of marijuana across the border. Why not send a smaller van containing a bit of marijuana through customs or border protection, etc., etc., have them on the inside confiscate the small van, and because they're busy opening up the van looking for, I don't know, a kilo or so of cocaine, the 10 tons of marijuana passes through. That's the common routine as I understand it. Anyway, this woman is incredibly powerful, and I think she played a key role in funding the development of this split tunneling procedure in the government of the United States, where the data, including time and location stamped data from a crime scene, could be routed via her friends in the evil teachers community, which is based out of the University of Illinois, Chicago, which hosted Bill Ayers, a psychopathic killer and leader of the Weather Underground organization, hosted him for decades, while his wife, also a psychopathic killer, resided as on faculty at Northwestern University. What appears to have happened, and I take my hat off because these guys are obviously pretty bright, is they managed to take the electronic visualization laboratory in the University of Illinois, Chicago, hook it up to fiber optic links that run, and maybe you could just put up that Northwestern IT partnerships,
Sure.
Jason. And let's just take a look at what kind of countries and institutions and companies are on that list. Yeah, there we are. Northwestern University IT partnerships. Now, to its undying, I believe, unremitting shame, Northwestern University put on faculty a psychopathic killer. And she gives seminars on torture paradigms and practice. So folks, when you're sending your young people to university, do you really want them to go to a university that basically lauds the behavior of this, well, bitch maybe is too strong a word. But look at the country, look at the institutions or government organizations that are on this Northwestern IT partnerships. Russian Federation. So when the media talk about Trump and the Russian Federation, why not go to the Northwestern University and find out if the Weathermen is really still underground or they're alive and kicking around the world? Over to you, Jason.
Well, David, there's a couple things I wanted to bring to your attention. Some of our viewers in the comments here are asking if this is connected to the Nexium cult and Allison Mack pleading guilty. But before we answer that, I wanted to bring something else to your attention. You know, I never heard of Christine Marcy before you had mentioned her, and we've been attempting to do our best to research her. And you showed me this article from the Washington Post where she was written up. Now, I just Googled that, and I wanted you to notice, David, that the date here is March 25th, 2019. And certainly you and I have looked at this well prior. That's only about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and there's something strange happening to it. It says Christine Marcy, now a supergrade. But as I recall, this article previously had a typo where it said Christine Mary. And in fact, when I search for Mary, there's no occurrence of the word Mary in this article. So that would indicate that perhaps an agent of SERCO, many of which have been aggressively contacting some of the companies that you and I discuss, I presume in an effort to thwart us in some way, alert their legal departments, accusing us of things that we aren't doing, just to sort of create a problem or make it appear that things that we've said are not true or correct. That's interesting that that change has occurred. And I've also just been reminded that we do have a huge fan, and by huge I mean literally huge, hairy, tattooed, slurping, gurgling fan of ours who was a little upset that I referred to him as corpulent, and I do need to apologize. That was not an accurate description. I left out belligerent and ignorant, but it's interesting to note that this article has changed.
Yes, and also, does it still have Mendenhall's baby?
Let's check. How do you spell Mendenhall?
Mendenhall.
M-E-N?
M-E-N-D-E-N. Hall. Mendenhall's baby.
I don't, you know what? It
while,
doesn't.
While you're looking for that, and that would be interesting if it had been deleted, let's go back to Christine Marcy behavior or activities in the 1980s. And let me just put this into general context. I think what you bring to the equation and I bring to the equation is something kind of unique in maybe the edutainment world, is that you the other day sent me a little video of Phantasma VR, and I looked at it. Because I'm old and a bit slow, I didn't realize how to manipulate that image. Would you mind actually putting that up, because I think it will demonstrate to our listeners that you and I already have formed what I would call a virtual production crew, where we could actually analyze a crime scene with virtual reality, reverse engineer it, reapply the time and location stamps to the data, and then with the audience, and I think it's absolutely important that the audience understands that what we're offering is an interactive ability to immerse yourself in virtual reality and solve the damn crime.
Yes.
It won't be just you and me that solve the crime. It'll be people who come or are associated with virtual crime scenes. For example, maybe people are still around who actually were in Dealey Plaza when Kennedy was shot, and they saw something that at the time stuck in their head. You know, like I had my hair cut by Jack Ruby's barber the year following, and he told me when I asked him what people in Dallas thought about the murder of Kennedy, he said, everyone in Dallas knows there were multiple snipers. Now, is that a fact? Well, I don't know. But the fact is, with virtual reality, we could reconstruct what happened to Kennedy, including the back of his head being blown off, and look for the various ballistics. But anyway, perhaps you could just pop in your
Absolutely.
video, if you
Well,
will.
let me
And
give
you can,
everyone a little background on this because I think it plays into what we're looking at here on the Washington Post. Certainly the word Mendenhall has been, you might say, scrubbed from this
you're joking.
article.
You're
I'm not
joking.
joking. I'm serious. It's
Oh
gone.
my gosh.
It's gone.
You know, these guys are so stupid.
I love
Right.
working with you, David. But
Well,
see,
yeah, go on.
well, the reason it plays into what we're talking about is that they are becoming so overt, so obvious in what they're doing. They are determined to demonstrate to the public at large that somehow you and I are lying or what we're saying is wrong. And part of the reason I completely discounted the corpulent, ignorant, belligerent agent of SERCO, who quite apparently has contacted the Washington Post in order to update this article, I discounted what he was saying because he called me and insisted that you were lying to me and that you and Field were lying. Now, my approach to an accusation like that is to first consider that it's possible somebody might be incorrect and might have said something that's not accurate, but for someone to be deliberately lying, we would need more information than just an incorrect statement. Now, another thing that's been said is they've tried to cast doubt on me because what they want to do is they want to defund Crowdsource the Truth. They do not want people to go to patreon.com/reverse-CSI storyboards or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth or subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth because they want to make it seem like we're trying to lie to people to get money when in fact all we're doing is to try to make a very resilient independent news organization. I don't want a job at Fox or CNN or even have a major sponsor come in and give me one large payment to sponsor the show because then they inherently have got undue financial influence over what we're saying. I think in part the people that are working against us fear this concept of a distributed, decentralized sponsorship program where many people provide very small amounts of money each, and that allows us to grow the organization. So in part of their effort to try to delegitimize me, they've spread this ridiculous nonsense that somehow I was not the CEO of 21st Century's 3D. Somehow I did not develop this technology that for 20 years allowed me to remain at the cutting edge of 3D technology and become internationally recognized. So after I transitioned out of my Hollywood career, I was looking for the next thing to do, and I was really quite dissatisfied with the state of the art of virtual reality technology. So I designed my own camera system, and I went to the Houdini Museum here in New York City, where I photographed this. It's actually shot in 16K resolution, and it's an interactive virtual reality movie. Interactive in that the viewer can choose what part of it they're watching. You can zoom in on different aspects of what's going on here in the magic store. You can watch, magic tricks being done by the different magicians who appear around the store, and you can be entertained by a variety of things. And people can go to Phantasma if they come to New York City. It's on 33rd Street. And I was in there once again during the course of working on Crowdsource the Truth because I've become friends with the guys that work there and spent some time in there shooting. Playing back a little bit slowly here because I guess the resources of the computer are being quite taxed. But I would also add, David, that this has been photographed in stereoscopic 3D, and unfortunately YouTube has basically terminated their formerly extremely robust support for stereoscopic 3D. You used to be able to watch this thing in full color. Now you need these red and blue anaglyphic glasses, and it's a bit of a reduced quality presentation. But with you know, a headset, a virtual reality headset, or some, yeah, it's playing really slowly, some more advanced technology, we could still watch it in 3D. So in our offline conversations where you and I have been talking about the evil Batcave, I had mentioned to you that we could actually recreate a virtual reality environment without an evil Batcave, and then people could watch it either in 2 dimensions here on YouTube, or if they have the appropriate mobile phone and viewer, you can actually still see Phantasma VR in stereoscopic 3D. This is the son of one of my neighbors here in New York City who's quite adept with the card tricks, and you know, I forget exactly what you call this technique that he engages in, but did a little movie here of this fine young man and employed some movie magic as well. I had shown this to J.J. Abrams, the director of Star Wars and Star Trek, at the South by Southwest Film Festival, and he was quite impressed with it. He said it was the best stereoscopic VR presentation he had ever seen.
Well, I congratulate you, and that brings me back to when I saw this for the first time. As I said, I didn't know how to use it, and I didn't realize it was interactive. I thought I could hear this voice, and I said, "What the hell is this?" And then eventually, someone younger and smarter than me explained that I had to actually move the screen, and then my jaw dropped because I watched this. Well, whatever, and then I realized, like you said, with our show, we're already doing virtual production,
yes,
right? Because you are showing this, so people in their imagination can inhabit that magic museum inside New York. But just imagine if this was the John Benet Ramsey house, folks. You know, on Christmas Eve, we could take the empirical data, right, reverse engineer it, add back the time and location stamps that have been stripped from it by the conspirators, because that was a major, major crime. I believe that the John Benet Ramsey murder was as important to the future of the United States as the murder of many people might look at that ridiculous. But remember, with John Benet Ramsey, there was a 3-page ransom note that because these people are stupid and very arrogant, they felt it necessary to write a 3-page ransom note for a lousy $118,000, where they specified lots and lots of things that describe themselves and makes them look smarter than they really are. So what I'm saying is, as a virtual production crew, you and I are already fully engaged in reversing and simulating crime scenes. We just are not doing it in the evil Batcave. The evil facility, I think, was created in 1991, Electronic Visualization Laboratory. But its predecessor, with a different name that I forget, goes back to 1973. So it's got a long pedigree. The Bat part, evil Batcave, is for bright advanced technologies, and Cave is cave, automated or automatic virtual environment. So all that is a technology of visualization, right? And it's extremely powerful because hypothetically, on the morning of 9/11, there could have been up to 40 or 50 people sitting in the evil Batcave at the University of Illinois, Chicago, guided, aided, abetted, and goaded on by Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dawn. Why not? After all, they're married. With the evil Batcave facility in Chicago, you could actually watch in real time the attacks unfolding on the World Trade Center in New York and on the Pentagon in Washington. And now this indicates what I'm about to say now, indicates the importance of reattaching the timestamps that are being separated from the data in order to feed what I believe is a Deadpool betting ring of elite teachers. And a Deadpool betting ring would allow them actually to bet on the time of death and the body counts at mass casualty or wrongful death events. So it's vitally important, if you have a global conspiracy, back to the Secret Service, to have timestamps on all relevant information that relates to the assets that had to be integrated and brought together to hide and execute the attacks of 9/11. So then, as you know, well, I think maybe you could take off, What about the timing of the signature on the alibi plate at the Salsa Bar and Grill? Maybe you could just comment on that.
Oh,
James.
right. Yes, yes. Well, before we do that, David, I just wanted to take you back to this John Benet Ramsey ransom note. Forgive me, I have it on the wrong screen. I want to make sure you can see it. This John Benet Ramsey ransom note, again, another element of that case that I was unaware of until you brought it to my attention, and I agree, it's a fascinating and evidence-rich piece of evidence, and it's got this line here that says, "We are familiar with law enforcement countermeasures." So breaking the chain of custody of evidence, that's a very sophisticated countermeasure to a law enforcement investigation. And it's funny because the first time you brought up that specific phraseology coincided with either the exact day or within a day or two of me receiving, one of the many legal documents I've gotten in these frivolous lawsuits that have been brought against me in an effort to try to stop Crowdsource the Truth from carrying on, in which Mr. Swigert spoke about evidence that I had submitted, which showed that he's been harassing me and that he injected himself into what I was doing. He claimed that I had broken the chain of evidence, something I was totally unaware of, and it's an interesting point of coincidence that whoever wrote this ransom note boasts of being aware of that technique, that countermeasure to being investigated.
And what we should know about Swigert is there are bits of his career that crept out, but he worked with Booz Allen and Hamilton and on classified networks. He describes himself as an ethical hacker and a social engineer. Basically, he has all of the skill sets, let's say, to take a Booz Allen and Hamilton top-off exercise on 911, which is a continuity of government exercise where top officials are brought before a camera to communicate in a manner that doesn't panic the public. But equally, if you had the back door into the script which they read out, you could actually have them disguising or describing a switch from a simulated continuity of government exercise to live fire, aided and abetted or perpetrated, wittingly or unwittingly, willing or unwittingly, by David Swigert.
Yes.
Because he has all the technologies available to take an exercise and switch it from a simulation to live fire. And then the logic, of course, is you go back to the patent office and you see if you can find a patent where the description of the patent honors the information or data at the crime scene. So, for example, there is a patent taken out which is called the Interactive Training System for Boeing, no, not for AWACS weapons directors, where it talks about switching from courseware through simulation to live fire. But anyway, I see you've just got the Salsa Bar and Grill. Maybe
yes.
we could.
And I should also add, we're not accusing David Swigert of having any involvement in the murder of John Benet Ramsey, just pointing out an unusual coincidence about claims that he's made publicly and things that are written in that bizarre ransom note. I would also say, David, when you talk about interactive training systems, that causes me to think of virtual reality simulations. I don't know if that's part of this, but certainly it could be, and this patent could be applied to that. And as you have said, we've shown virtual reality on the program before when we previously looked at this Salsa Bar and Grill virtual reality tour of the restaurant. And one of these virtual reality tours actually shows Bill Clinton's signed plate. It's a little tricky to navigate. It might be this one here. Yeah, I think it's this one. I don't think I can interactively move this. It just sort of, rotates around the restaurant so you can get a feel for what it looks like if you're planning your wedding there or something like that. What do you think about this?
Well, again, this comes back to the idea that you and I think unconsciously, we've drifted towards forming a virtual production crew where we already have the facilities to create in the imagination of our listeners the ability to move through a crime scene and reconstitute the time and the date stamps such that we can visualize why was Bill Clinton sent to the Salsa Bar and Grill, where he signed that plate, which is up on the wall.
Yep.
And it signed Bill Clinton, 11th of September, 2001, with 3 underlines, squitch. And I'm saying, wouldn't that be interesting to check the exact time, and I'm sure we can find it, and compare that with the time when what allegedly was going to hit the Pentagon, that's American Airlines Flight 77, where the trajectory of what did hit the Pentagon was rather bizarre. And I've discussed this at length with Field McConnell, because this is a large passenger jet that allegedly was over the Pentagon at 7,000 feet. And then it did a tight, pivoted, slice back turn of 270 degrees, leveled off at 15 feet or 10 feet elevation above the Pentagon lawn, and flew at 500 miles an hour through the first floor window of the Pentagon's US Navy Command Center, and killed everyone in the Pentagon's US Navy Command Center, including and especially Captain Gerald DeConto, the duty officer, and tunneled through the Pentagon and out the other side at the back, the internal courtyard, to create a 12-foot diameter hole with what I would estimate is 1.5 tons of debris. Now, Mr. Swigert, you're an Air Force veteran, and I think I challenge you, and you haven't responded, which leaves me to suspect either you don't know the answer or you don't want to tell us that you know the answer. But I asked you about 3, 4, 5 shows ago, could you identify which Boeing aircraft could tunnel through 8 reinforced walls of the Pentagon and create 1.5 tons of debris in the interior courtyard? You haven't replied. And of course, you know that no Boeing aluminum skinned aircraft could do that. It has to be something else. Back to the patent office, and if you Google rocket boosted hardened penetrator bomb made by or invented by Lockheed Martin, you have potentially the missile that created that hole, right? And then you have a thread of a discussion, well, maybe little JonBenet Ramsey's murder was intended to terrify and extort the chain of command in Lockheed Martin above the father, John Bennett Ramsey. You have, on the day she was killed, maybe she was killed at midnight on Christmas Day, because these vermin put a lot of value in symbolic times. Yeah. Midnight on Christmas Day, the birth of Christ, and, all the fun that the children and the families have over Christmas Day. If you're a member of the evil teachers community that believes in nothing, and therefore they believe in anything, who has one of the members who lectures on torture paradigms and practice, well, maybe Bernardine Dawn dreamt up the kinds of torture that little JonBenet Ramsey was put through as a symbolic, or as a message to the Lockheed Martin chain of command on 9/11, which included, and presumably they cut the check, 2 directors, one named Lynn Cheney and the other Norman Mineta. And then, of course, we have to ask in our virtual production, what were they doing on 9/11? Well, that's quite interesting. Over to you, Jason.
Yeah, it is shocking, David. I mean, I think most people younger than, I don't know, a certain age, people who weren't alive in the 60s, don't know very much at all about the Weather Underground. And certainly people who are in their 20s, like we've seen some more recent photos of Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dawn, and they've got students who think they're great. I even saw a video of some guy went to a lecture and asked her when she's going to answer for the killing of, I think it was a police officer who had like his eye taken out with some shrapnel from a bomb, and some other police officers that were killed. And people who were there at the event were sort of angry at this guy who was asking the questions. I don't think we can say it frequently enough that these two are psychopathic killers who got away with murder, literally. And I mean, I get it that if there's problems with how the investigation are done, the chain of evidence is broken, the chain of custody on the evidence is broken, and they can't be convicted. But why would they be hired by the University of Illinois and Northwestern University, respectively, and lauded as members of the academic community rather than shunned as horrendous criminals who haven't met justice?
Well, back to the split tunnel procedure. So, and again, I think it's so fascinating that the Secret Service is supposed to investigate conspiracies. We obviously have a conspiracy here with these kind of crimes. We have Dave Swigart, wittingly or unwittingly, I think he might be so dumb that he doesn't even know that he's scrubbing the data, but the effect he has is he's limiting the ability of the Secret Service to investigate these crimes, including the attack on the London Bridge by knife-wielding terrorists, the attack on JonBenet Ramsey, and the attack on the Pentagon on 911. And the danger for Swigart is he needs to understand that if you are removing or being seen to remove evidence from a crime scene, we, the people, and I'm including the people of the world, the free people of the world, are entitled to an aggressive inference of guilt, right? Now, if the association of evil teachers is one day connected through SERCO, and I'll come to SERCO again in a minute, and SERCO is deemed to be operating a prisoner escorted patent for rent in murder for hire network, everyone associated with that racketeering network is liable to some very serious penalties, because anyone who uses or travel or induces the victim to use or travel in interstate or foreign commerce for the purpose of murder for hire where death results is looking at a penalty of life imprisonment or the death sentence. And there's no statute of limitations on murder. So, Mr. Swigart, I suggest you take your head out of where the sun doesn't shine, answer my question about what could create a hole in the Pentagon or tunnel a hole through the Pentagon. And if you can't find a Boeing that matches the specification of punching a hole with a ton and a half of debris on the inside, you better look for something else. And maybe, just maybe, given you've got an Air Force veteran background, maybe you could help us solve a crime instead of clouding the evidence that prevents us from solving the crime. Over to you, Jason.
He's very busy making videos about you and I, David. And then the other thing that I find them doing is utilizing false names on accounts that they put onto YouTube and other services. There's a lot of thumbs down on this video right now, and considering so many of them, more than 50% of them showed up before the video even began, I really don't think there's people who are subscribing to Crowdsource the Truth specifically to dislike videos, other than those that are, you know, maybe fake accounts or I'm not saying that everyone watching every video that we do must inherently like it, but it seems odd that someone would choose to dislike a video before it starts, unless they don't want people to see that video, because it's my understanding that the thumbs up, thumbs down thing on YouTube has some impact on how the YouTube search engine handles the video in terms of how it goes out. So I do want to encourage our viewers, David, to hit that thumbs up button and to share this video with their friends on social media, and just email it to people who you think might find it interesting. And if people enjoy what you and I speak about, they should join us every Friday on patreon.com/reverse-CSI storyboards and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. There are some people, David, who don't like Patreon, and for that reason, I've also created a page on subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. But what we really want to do is move away from only using YouTube to distribute this information. I know everyone wants information to be free, but of course, you and I need food, and we spend quite a lot of time preparing these videos and doing other things. And we also don't want to play right into an environment where our data is easily manipulated. The other thing I wanted to mention about this split tunnel idea, because again, it's another one of these things that I never knew about until you told me about it. It's not just a software VPN technique, the split tunneling. By directing information to different discrete places, they can hide things. And I think a lot of the way these guys operate is to take some of the techniques of the software and computer systems that they admire and find effective, and to apply those to other things in how they operate. For instance, they're big fans of cryptocurrency because it's a decentralized way of doing things. And I find that their harassment techniques are also decentralized. Rather than having one person. You know, you and I appear here under our real names, and everybody knows they can come to Crowdsource the Truth and see our shows. But it seems that our adversaries like to use lots of different accounts, lots of different fake names, put in comments, try to bait us into debates on things, and it's sort of a decentralized, distributed harassment campaign. So again, to counteract those sort of things, I always like to encourage our viewers to go to patreon.com/reverse CSI storyboards, patreon.com/crowdsource the truth, and of course, subscribestar.com/crowdsource the truth. And I don't want to forget, David, you've recently taken to tweeting quite frequently, and I want to remind everyone to follow you on Twitter. They can go to Twitter, and you're on there at CSI Hawkins. You're tweeting out your daily posts, which are also available at Reverse CSI Scripts. And it's a good way for people to keep in touch with you and follow the research that you're doing. Let me just bring that up so everybody can see it. Boy, we're really moving slowly here today. I'm thinking about adding some faster internet service here. I've been looking around at some options. There we go. So people can follow you on Twitter at CSI Hawkins, and of course your website, Reverse CSI Scripts.
Okay, yes, thank you for that, Jason. And let me just emphasize again, I mean, there are multiple reasons why I like the idea of describing what you and I do together as constituting a virtual production crew, because I think people can more easily understand that than some of the elements when you take it all apart. So just as Jason showed the interior of the Houdini Magic Museum in New York, we could conceive with the audience of being inside the John Benet Ramsey house. And then we have some empirical data that is not disputed. For example, her skull was nearly cracked right around. She was probably tasered in the belly and under the ear. She was garroted, and probably she was sodomized. So this is a level of brutality that is beyond, I think, belief for most people. I don't even want to talk about it. However, right, it's a clue-rich crime scene. All right, there's plenty of evidence, including that 3-page ransom note, which meant that it should have been sold within days, in my opinion. Right now, any fictional detective or Sherlock Holmes would arrive on that, and he'd be so busy looking at all these extraordinary crews, he'd probably forget, you know, to say anything to Dr. Watson. But that's kind of by the by. What we've got here, of course, is the organization of that killing was very structured, and there was a stand down. What was the stand down? When the daughter of a leading executive in a company such as Access Graphics and Lockheed Martin is threatened, automatically the assumption should be by the Secret Service that that threatens the integrity or security of the government, because Lockheed Martin is a major provider of technologies involved in, you know, keeping the peace and prosecuting a war. But neither the FBI or the Lockheed Martin security ever visited that crime scene. So there's a classic example where data from the crime scene, which is the report by the mother that there's been a ransom note, should have alerted and triggered a flooding of agents, FBI agents. Remember, there's a ransom note that appears to be taking a child of tender years away from her home. She could have gone interstate. They didn't know at that time, or some people knew, I think, very well, that she was down in the basement, right? So there was a planning, right, a very sophisticated planning that I believe was aimed at extorting concessions from the directors of Lockheed Martin. Like, for example, these people are planning for the long term. Bernardine Dawn and Bill Ayers were committed to overthrowing the United States government. Larry Gruhl penetrated the Students for a Democratic Society, or the Weather Underground, and asked them what they would be doing if their revolution was successful. And I think he was told, well, it won't be possible to re-educate all Americans, so we're probably going to have to kill 25 million of them.
Yeah.
So to put that back on the back burner and allow these people to migrate into these two, I say somewhat circumspectly, great universities, because a great university would not hire these two.
Yeah.
So neither the University of Illinois in Chicago or Northwestern University, who knew everything or they needed to know about Ayers and Bernardine Dawn, not to take them on faculty. Having allowed them into faculty, of course, you get these two poisonous little worms, the ability to actually put together an international network that is geared to overthrow the government of the United States in what they failed to do in the 1970s. So now, the only way I think to unravel this is, first of all, they have an organization, let me repeat that, I think it's a prisoner escorted, pattern for rent, murder for hire network, where there will never be enough evidence at the crime scene or enough witnesses with the courage to come forward to get a beyond reasonable doubt conviction in the criminal court. The only way to do it, and I emphasize that, and this is where you and I as a virtual production crew can help, we can reverse engineer the crime scene, get it to fit the empirical data, put that in the hands of our public, and that's why I'm asking our public, that's yours and mine, to understand it's not just the money that you need, if you will, to put into this work that we do as a virtual production crew. It's the momentum you establish by doing it yourself and telling it or inviting or asking your friends to do it, because there is nowhere else in the world where two people can come together and create a virtual production facility which actually solves crime and leads to success in a wrongful death claim. Now, let me just quickly go on to Boeing, right? Boeing is a target for these vermin, right? Now, the Boeing pilots of the 737 MAX 8 plane in Ethiopia that went down apparently tried 4 times to override the software that had been installed by Boeing, and each time the software overrode the pilots. Now, I have a background, I've probably been 40 years as a mentor in the artificial intelligence and expert system community. I'm saying that that software indicates that the Boeing aircraft was suffering an attack from a patented device known as an asymmetric encryption system that would allow the header and the body of the content to be separated, and the encryption applied to the header relatively minor, because it would just route the message into the particular targeted Boeing aircraft, and the body, the content, or I think they call it the load or the cargo or something like that, actually gets into the the flight management computers and triggers the software to override the pilot, so the plane crashes. Now, if you're a cynic, of course, and you were able to do that remotely, maybe through the evil Batcave in Chicago, of course, you could say to your teacher's friends, the evil teacher's friends, well, if you place your bets on the time of the crash or the body count, we'll be able to make an arrangement where you pick up the money and scoop the pot, and no one ever finds you guilty. I think Boeing needs help, and I don't see why a virtual production crew like you and me, Jason, couldn't go to Boeing and Boeing shareholders and say, hey, we can help in a wrongful death suit. Over to you.
It's interesting, David, to see that this lawsuit was filed in Chicago by, on behalf of Boeing shareholders. It's a class action suit seeking damages after the March 10th crash, which wiped $34 billion off of Boeing's market capitalization. It reminded me, again, I've been looking into this Weather Underground since you brought them to my attention, and I apologize, I don't have this clip ready, but Bernardine Dawn delivered some kind of pre-recorded, audio cassette address that went out on a radio show in the 1960s or the 1970s, where it was kind of like reading their manifesto or something, and she says, protect your banks, protect your planes, protect your airplanes.
And protect your oil rigs. For example, I worked in the oil industry, as you know. I used to be employed by Schlumberger to fly around the world and help put out oil fires, which was quite exciting, quite dangerous.
Yeah.
I provided a sort of high-tech component as to steering the relief well to intersect the wild well and pump mud or cement or slurry into the wild well to snuff off the oil that would be, or gas that was going to the surface. So I look at BP. Now, I think BP lost 42 billion pounds in one day with that blowout. But I've looked at the blowout. It was sabotage. It's very obviously sabotage.
I thought it was negligence. Didn't they like put too much cement or not wait for the cement to dry or something?
No, the Schlumberger crew on that rig that was waiting to do what's called a cement bond log, which you have to have a cement bond log to determine whether the casing has been cemented to the formation such that oil and gas can't come up the outside of the casing, accumulate under the helicopter deck, where there was an incendiary device to ignite it. I mean, I can see that. It's so blindingly obvious. And that would be a classic example of a virtual production crew where we could get people who are not familiar with oil rigs, as I am, to go around and reverse engineer the events that led up to it. Now, what happened just before the well blew is the Schlumberger crew that was waiting to do the cement bond log was called off the rig and taken off the rig by the helicopter. That meant there was no cement bond log to prove that the casing had been properly cemented in place, so there was no leakage up the outside. So BP and its drilling contractor, which I think is Transocean, which is a partially owned Schlumberger company, in, I think, Zug in Switzerland, where Mark Rich, the Clinton pardonee, hanged his hat, right? So if you shorted BP shares prior to the rig blowing up, you made a lot of money, right? BP was nearly brought to its knees, just like they're trying to do with Boeing. People should understand that in Chicago, one of the oldest and most disreputable law firms, in my opinion, in that it employed Bernardine Dawn and Michelle Obama and Barack Obama in the 1984-1991 period. So we had an opportunity where the leader of the Weather Underground organization groomed Barack Obama and Michelle Obama, in my opinion, for their journey to the White House. So you have these evil teachers networks connected through the electronic visualization laboratory that have real-time access to crime scenes where they can take a position and actually make a great deal of money or pursue their careers at the expense of we the people. Over to you.
David, I've found the Weather Underground clip, and I think I've got the approximate time. Would you like to listen to this for a moment?
Please, yeah.
They not only helped us escape, they spirited us to several of their underground
This is Timothy Leary talking about being broken out of jail.
We want to tell the people of the United States the Third World War has begun. Join us in the fight for freedom, because we are everywhere, and we're happy, and we're free, and we're going to make the world free.
This is the 5th communication from the Weathermen Underground. Rosemary and Tim are free and high. We are building a culture and a society that can resist genocide. It is a culture of total resistance to mind-controlling maniacs. A culture of high-energy sisters getting it on, of hippie acid smiles and communes and freedom to be the farthest out people we can be. Now we are everywhere, and next week families and tribes will attack the enemy around the country. We are not just attacking targets. We are bringing a pitiful, helpless giant to its knees. Guard your planes, guard your colleges, guard your banks, guard your children, guard your doors.
Can you verify that the voice is that of Bernadine Dorn?
Yes, I'm her sister, and I'll verify that it's her voice. I'm Jennifer.
She was asked if you could verify that it's the voice of Bernadine Dorn, and her sister said, yes, it is. So we should remind people that the enemy that Bernadine Dorn was describing is the United States of America, and the police, the government, the people. So that's a pretty psychotic message. What do you think about that, David? Had you heard that before?
Well, it reminds me of the Eli Lilly patent of 1954 for lysergic acid amide, right, which is useful apparently from a psychotherapy point of view because it elicits characteristic patterns of rage and hallucinations. And if I look at this Timothy Leary, or whatever his name is, I look at his eyes, I mean, he's high on something, right?
Oh,
so basically you've got a kind of, yeah, they're a group of zombies, right, who've been programmed with drugs and propaganda, of which, as I said, the BBC is the world's leading authority in news, entertainment, and propaganda. So in a certain sense, I feel sorry for them. I mean, they're pathetic little losers, right? But they've wormed and weaseled their way into the system where decent people, including the 125 people associated with Captain Gerald DeConto in the Pentagon's U.S. Navy Command Center, have been obliterated. And I'll remind these people, there's no statute of limitations on murders. And when, as I think we will succeed, we activate or reactivate the United States Secret Service to do what they're supposed to do, Jason, then I don't issue a threat, but I think justice will be swift. And if you look at that sinister-looking creature, besides, I don't know whether that's a graffiti chalk mark, but right, Hillary Clinton is a remarkable person because she was on faculty at the University of Arkansas with her husband, which constitutes to me the network of evil teachers around the world. And did you notice that Bernadine Dawn said, "Watch your colleges"?
Yes.
Well, what's she talking about? Yeah, she's
Yes.
talking about the university network,
Yeah.
right? That I think is now served by EduRome. Right, EduRome. Maybe you could put up a logo for that.
Yeah.
That's the Wi-Fi network where a member university student or teacher can travel anywhere in the world and plug their card in, and they are now in what I think is termed a global Wi-Fi hotspot, right? That is to say, you can take the imperial brain of the United Kingdom in the general instrument room of the General Post Office in London of, let's say, the 1850s, right? You can transpose that onto EduRome and this Northwestern University IT partnerships. And these brain-dead faculty members, sure, some of them are very nice, some of them are very bright, but they're naive to the point of a laughing stock, right? For example, the climate change scam, where they say carbon dioxide, which is God's gas, it's a wholly beneficial, transparent, non-toxic fertilizer gas existing in trace elements in the atmosphere. If you take it away, the plants are going to die because they're going to go brown. And then you'll have to change the Green Party to the Brown Party, which doesn't quite have the same cachet. Over to you.
Well, David, we're almost out of time for today, but I'm always fascinated by what you bring up, and really kind of the most amazing thing about all of this stuff that you've been talking about. First of all, the opponents of what we're trying to do, I think, just make themselves more and more obvious with the overt measures that they're taking, with the constant antagonistic videos and the down votes on the videos and all the stupid letters they're writing to everyone who, I mean, I'm still waiting for them to produce evidence of me being in Ukraine. They were talking about us infringing copyrights by showing the Federal Bridge, etc. But this line of reasoning with the Weather Underground infiltrating the university system, having access to the incredibly powerful computer technology in the electronic visualization laboratory at the University of Chicago. Mr. Swigert, I believe, sent letters to the University of Chicago, and I even called them to talk about this. They don't seem to want to talk about it. I don't know why that is, but it causes me to think back to the first stereoscopic video production I ever did. And as a matter of fact, that one in the magic shop, it was one of the last, to tell you the truth, because the 3D business basically dried up. That wasn't a paying client. That was a system that I built to promote this new generation of virtual reality productions, and it never really got off the ground. You know, Facebook bought that company Oculus Rift, and there's that famous picture of Mark Zuckerberg with everybody wearing the headsets. I was never able to really make virtual reality production profitable. But the point is, I wanted to just show everyone, before we close, the very first stereoscopic 3D motion picture production I ever did, so that people can think about how the level of sophistication of something like the Weather Underground, a group that was determined to destroy America and started out when they were in college with very unsophisticated bombs that were just made of chemicals that they could buy, and nails and screws and pieces of shrapnel. and how much more sophisticated an operation like that would have become over the 30 to 40 years since then, between those early bombs and 9/11. This right here is the first 3D production that I ever did in 1991, just out on the street outside my old apartment with a Bolex camera. And I mean, again, unfortunately, YouTube has done away with their 3D playback, so you'd have to really get those red and blue glasses. But you can see it was just me and my friends from college out on the street doing the most simplistic, you know, the camera wasn't really doing much of anything. You cannot interact with this video. You're basically just, you know, looking at the streets of New York City in 3D. So I think about how much more sophisticated the 16K digital capture, interactive, stereoscopic virtual reality production shot in the Houdini Museum is compared to this. And I wonder, could the Weather Underground have gotten that much more sophisticated with access to all the patents that you've told us about over the year or two that you and I have been talking, and to infiltrate the government and the university system, and to have ethical hackers and social engineers and all of these different things at their disposal to re-educate America and make people think certain things are true that aren't, and achieve these horrendous goals?
Well, then I'd like to go back. Yes, they are capable of it. Yes, they're doing it right now. There is a split tunnel operation operating on a global scale. It's actually masking murder for hire, prisoner escorted, pattern for rent, murder for hire around the world, driven by SERCO and its shareholders, which incidentally include the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the United Kingdom, and Singapore, where their representatives met on the 47th floor of the North Tower on the morning of 9/11 with representatives from two pension funds, the Teachers' Pension Fund in the United Kingdom and in the United States, with $1.5 trillion of assets under management. And I believe, and that's what I think that you and I can offer with our collective experience, we can offer, we or you, the people, the ability to go into an immersive facility, into a crime scene, like on the bridge, the London Bridge, in that 2017 attack. And let me just read before closing, Jason, if I may, the headlines from BuzzFeed News. Audit of access to classified networks is a cover-up, Treasury officials charge. An Inspector General audit finds there was no mass revocation of access to classified networks critical to responding to terrorism. But some officials dismissed the audit as a cover-up. The report also concludes there is a strained relationship between two feuding agencies within the Treasury Department. This was posted November the 1st, 2017. And just this first paragraph. When knife-wielding terrorists killed 8 people on London Bridge this summer, employees from a critical office in the US Treasury Department leapt to their computers to answer urgent queries about how the terrorists got their money and who might have funded them. But as a BuzzFeed news story revealed, they said they couldn't do their jobs properly because they were shut out of critical classified computer networks. Very few people could have shut them out with what is known as a revocation system. One such person would be David Swagger, right? So I believe that's another thing. So whilst he's thinking about trying to identify which Boeing aircraft could punch a tunnel through the Pentagon, maybe he could tell us how he would prove that there was no revocation of patents, no revocation of certificates that might have allowed the Secret Service, who had been moved into or away from the Department of Treasury, to solve the crimes on the London Bridge and Bernardine Dawn's antics, you know, in attempting to overthrow the government of the United States, which I believe persisted right through 9/11. Over to you.
Yeah. Well, David, it's been a very interesting show. I look forward to our reconvening on Friday. I hope everyone will join us on patreon.com/reverse-CSI storyboards and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. David, thank you so much for being with me this afternoon, and thanks to everyone for watching. We'll see you soon.
Okay, pleasure, Jason. Look forward to Friday. Bye now.